guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is an exceptional day because I'd like to share and read this novel with you. It talks about Oliver Twist, which is written by Charles Dickens. So this video is only gonna be about introduction to get general view about the novel and the writer as well. But in the next videos, we're gonna enjoy this novel together. If you appreciate that, let's jump into it. Here we go. Introduction. He rose from the table and advancing to the master, paw in hand, said, "Please, sir, I want some more." The master was fat, healthy man, but he turned very pale. He stared with horror and amusement at the small boy for some seconds. "What?" he said finally in a faint voice. "Please, sir," replied Oliver, "I want some more." Charles Dickens' delightful description of the poor, half-starved 9-year-old Oliver Twist shook in the fat, healthy workhouse master by asking for more meat. His thousands of readers in mid-19th century Britain laugh and cry. The scene has been repeated on the stage, in films, and in television dramas countless times. And the little orphan Oliver with his empty pool has become part of British national culture. The story of Oliver Twist had already been filmed 6 times before the most famous version was made in 1948, directed by David Lean, stage musical by Lennart, based on the story and called Oliver, full of humor, dance, and delightful songs, was a great success in the 1960s and is still regularly performed. The film version, made in 1968, was an even greater success. But there was a serious purpose to Dickens' original novel. He wanted to show his readers the terrible conditions in the state workhouses of that time, where the poor and the sick were forced to live in, and in particular to show the cruelty, beatings, and starvation of orphan children there. Charles Dickens was a new writer of fiction, this was his first real attempt at novel, and the first written under his own name, but from his own difficult early life and his work as journalist. He had experience of the horrors of poverty. Charles Dickens became one of the most popular writers of all time, creating some of the best-known characters in English literature, and he was born in Portsmouth, an important port on the south coast of England. In 1812, his father was a clerk in the Navy Pay Office, and for most of Charles' first 10 years, the family lived happily in Caton, another naval town in Kent, and his mother encouraged him to read from an early age, and he was a good pupil at a local school. It means he was a good student at a local school. So, unfortunately, his father was not a good manager of money, and the family became poorer and poorer. When Charles was only 10 years old, the family moved to poor area of London. 2 years later, they were deeply in debt. Charles' father was arrested and sent to prison, and Charles had to leave school. And Charles had to leave school and start to work. For 6 months, he worked in a factory doing hard and dirty work for little pay. But during those first 2 years in London, he walked the street and became familiar with all the areas of that great city. and with its people rich and poor, he also continued his reading and after leaving school began to work in lawyers' offices. He also started to write articles for newspapers and magazines about London and Londoners, using the name Boss by the age of 20. He was a reporter in the law courts and in Parliament. When he was 24, his first collection of short pieces was published in book form as sketches by Boss, and this was so popular that 2 other collections were published later. At 25, he became editor of Monthly's Miscellany, a monthly magazine, and he began to write chapters for its first story called The Polish Boy's Progress. Under the pen name Boss, he was at the same time regularly writing short amusing stories about Mr. Pickwick and his friends for another magazine, and these were becoming enormously popular. He continued to write these Pickwick papers until 1837, and he seemed to enjoy the pressure of work at this time, writing new stories about Pickwick. New chapters for the Polish Boy's Progress, later to be called Oliver Twist, as well as being both the editor and writer of other pieces for his magazine. He wrote by hand, of course, and at a great speed. His plots are often criticized for being loose and full of chance relationships and mythics. This cannot be denied, but the great strength of his writing was in his characters and in the descriptions of real people and places based on his years as journalist. The success of Oliver Twist confirmed both his reputation and the large regular income, and he went on to write about 20 novels. Most of which were published in monthly part-in magazines. He also wrote many short stories and articles and works for non-fiction. In his later novels, including Hard Times, Little Dorrit, and Our Mutual Friend, he presents an even darker view of the world, and his humor concentrates on the evil side of human experience. In particular, the inhuman social consequences of the law, industry, and trade. A man of great energy, Dickens also found the time to work for a number of organizations that helped the poor and improved social conditions. In 1841, he traveled to the US, where he spoke against slavery, for which he was severely criticized by much of the American press. His private life was not always happy. He married Catherine Hogarth in 1836, and they had 10 children, but they separated in 1858. By then, Dickens had fallen in love with a clever and charming young actress called Ellen Ternan. They met when she was 18, and Dickens was 45. They continued a close relationship for the rest of Dickens' life, although it was kept a secret, as the public would have been very shocked to know of it. Towards the end of his life, Dickens almost gave up writing and began to give dramatic readings of part of his books to enthusiastic audiences. He greatly enjoyed doing this. It was exciting and theatrical. One of his favorite pieces was The Murder of Nancy from Oliver Twist, and he knew how this reading would affect his audience and was then lifted when ladies often fainted during the performance. The strain of these frequent readings, however, greatly raised his blood pressure and without doubt contributed to his failing health at that time. Dickens died in 1870, and there was a great public grave at his death. After a big public funeral service, he was buried in Westminster Abbey in London. Oliver Twist was begun at a time when Dickens was both successful and extremely busy. The opening chapters were fairly simple and based to some extent on his own experiences as a child. He had just become a father for the first time, and he knew how different his own child's life would be from the life of the poor, a lonely orphan. In 1834, a new poor law had been introduced by Parliament. It was an attempt to organize official workhouses for people who were poor, ill, old, or otherwise unable to work or look after themselves. These workhouses were run by groups of local people, usually wealthy and middle class. Life in these workhouses was deliberately made hard. Husbands and wives were separated and the food was very poor. The idea was to discourage idleness among people who were able to work, but the sick, the old, and especially young children suffered badly. Oliver is born in a workhouse. He is an orphan from the day of his birth, and he is brought up without love or care, given the minimum of food and regularly beaten. At 9 years old, he goes to a large workhouse where he and other orphans exist under extreme conditions, punished for showing some spirit, and he is sold into employment with a coffin maker, where he continues to be treated very badly for the first 10 years of his life, and he has no family. He has no family, friends, care, or love of any kind. At last he runs away to London, arriving starved and exhausted, and is taken in by a gang of thieves who train him to steal. And it is here that the mood of the book sadly changes. As Dickens introduced his gangs of villains, Fati, the leader and the teacher of the boys, the artful Dodger and Charlie Bits, his most skillful pupils, the murderously evil bill seekers. Dickens wrote about these criminals and their environment with enthusiasm and in great detail. At once, there were protests from his readers, and they did not want to read of such horrors. Dickens replied that he described these people as they really were, living in dirtiest and poorest districts of London, running like rats from place to place, hiding from the police, and always facing the very real threat of hanging. Hanging was the punishment for many crimes at that time. Dickens' description of London's criminals and how they existed opened the eyes of many of the better people of London, who had little idea of where and how such people lived. Above all, Dickens made his criminals real villains, and in the end, they got the punishment they deserved. It must be remembered that London at this time was mostly a lawless place, Whole areas were occupied by criminals, and responsible people went into them at great risk. Pickpockets, burglars, thieves of all kinds were everywhere. Physical attacks, even murders, were common for the thief of purse. In 1829, Sir Robert Bobby Bill had created the first police force in that city. And in an attempt to control this growing crime wave, but his small band of policemen, pillars as they were called, and also later bobbies, were actually unpopular with ordinary people and received a little help from them. Many characters in Oliver Twist are either all goodness, like Rose Molly and Mr. Brown, or totally evil, like Fadden and Bill Six. Others are foolish, greedy, and weak, even funny, and among them all goes a little Oliver, holding the various parts of the story together. He suffered beatings, arrest, illness, and shooting, but he remains an innocent to the end, astonished when he realized that his companions are thieves, grateful for any signs of love and affection, and stirring motherly and sympathetic feelings, even in the heart of tough, straight women like Bill Six, your friend Nancy. That's it for introduction. Now it's time to move on and read some difficult words that I tried to define, which I think they are hard and difficult to understand. Right? Here we go. Here we go. We have advancing. Advancing to the master. Advancing, it means what? Advancing, it is in gerund form, and it means moving forwards in purposeful way. He advanced towards the master. Okay, right? Pole in hand. A round deep dish used for food or liquid, or we can say soup. And also we have, he stared with horror and amazement. He stared, it means to look directly at someone for a long time, especially when you are surprised or frightened. Stare, it means to look directly at someone for a long time, especially when you are surprised or frightened. He stared with horror and amusement at the small boy for some seconds. Right? The leftful description. The leftful description of the poor half-starved. The leftful, it means very pleasant, enjoyable. The leftful description, or we can say lovely description. Half-starved, it is what? Half-starved 9-year-old Oliver. Half-starved means very poorly fed or nourished. Or we can say having been deprived of food. Okay, right? Half-starved orphan boy. Or we can say child cat. And the little orphan Oliver. Orphan, it is what? Orphan is a child whose parents have died, are unknown. Oliver Twist is an orphan child. Okay, right. Serious purpose to Dickens' original novel. Serious purpose. Serious purpose, it means what? Crucial, very important, urgent, significant. Okay, right? Dickens has shown his significant purpose to his readers about the dreadful conditions in the state workhouses. Okay? To show here, it means what? He wanted to show. It means, you can say here, he wanted to show his readers the terrible conditions. To show, it means to reveal, to tell. Okay? It means to make secret information known to others. Terrible conditions. Terrible, it means what? Causing or involving great suffering, fear, or unhappiness. And you can say terrible, dreadful, or extremely bad conditions. Or you can say dreadful conditions. Cruelty. We can say here, in particular, to show the cruelty and beatings. Cruelty, it means what? Behavior that deliberately causes pain to other people, that makes them unhappy or upset. Upset, it means worried, angry, or you can say unhappy. Right? Beatings, it means an act of hitting someone repeatedly and hard. They gave them severe beatings. Right? Starvation of orphan children there. Starvation, it means famine, a lack of food. Thousands died of starvation. Clerk, his father was clerk in the Navy POS. Clerk, it means what? What does it mean? A person who works in an office dealing with the records or performing general office duties. Being a loss. His plots are often criticized for being loose. A loose plot, it means what? It is one in which interesting things keep happening, but they are not very tightly connected. So they are not very tightly connected. Okay? Charming. Charming young actress. Charming young actress, it means very attractive young actress. Very attractive young actress. Dickens almost gave up what? Give up writing. Give up. He gave up. It is in simple past. Here, to give up, it means, okay, it is phrasal verbs. Okay, phrasal verb. It means to stop doing something. Okay? He almost gave up writing and began to give dramatic readings. Good? Fine. Theatrical. It was exciting and theatrical. Theatrical, it means intended to attract attention. It was exciting and theatrical. It means attracting what? Attention. To attract attention or for attracting attention. Grave. Public grave. Grave, it is very great sadness. Very great sadness, especially at death of someone. Funeral service. Funeral, it means a ceremony honoring someone who has recently died, which happens before burning the body. Deliberately, on purpose, intentionally, or purposely. Yes. He did it intentionally or deliberately. Right? Workhouse. What does it mean? It means a building where very poor people in Britain used to work in the past in exchange for food and shelter. They used to work for what? In exchange for food and shelter. Great. And you can say here, he is brought up. Oliver is brought up without love or care. Brought up, it means it is phrasal verb. It means to raise or to care for a child until he or she is an adult. He is brought up without love and care. Arriving starved and exhausted. Arriving starved and exhausted. Arriving starved, very hungry. Exhausted, very tired. A gang of thieves. A gang of thieves, it means what? A gang of thieves, a group of people who associate or act as an organized body, especially for criminal or illegal purposes. Valine, or you can say valines, it is in plural, so it is countable noun. Valine, a bad person who harms other people or breaks the law. A valine person, it means what? An evil person. Districts of London. Districts of London. District, it means an area of a country or a city. An area of a country or a city. Hanging, it is the act of killing someone, especially as punishment for a serious crime, by dropping that person with a rope tied around their neck. Hanging, the act of killing someone, especially as punishment for a serious crime, by dropping that person with a rope tied around their neck. Pickpockets. Pickpocket is a person who steals from people's pockets. Pickpockets, you can say thief. Band of policemen. It means a small band of policemen, a small group of policemen. Okay? Band, it is a group. Greedy, here, it means what? Wanting a lot more food, money, etc. than you need. It means wanting wanting a lot more money or food, etc. than you need. That's it. See you next time. Bye-bye.